As we celebrate Heritage Day, there is no denying the fact that minority languages are slowly dying. Many factors contributing to this include globalization, modernization, and the blending of international cultures into such societies. But are we really making too much of a fuss about the so-called English-speaking children? Or could this be an advantage? To answer these questions and more, we are joined by Matsobane Sexwale, who is the founder and chief language coach at Rera Language. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time tonight. I've been asking our guests before we start speaking to tell us who they are.
Wow, nice surprise. Kina Matsobane Homotloka wa Sexwale. Ke Homotloka mama ruta wa lerodi. Ngwana motlou, ngwana mantuba.
If you were Pedi, I was going to say, yes, Aring Shate, Wadu, Ma, Yanung, you're not. So I'm not going to say that. But thank you for that. I mean, as we talk tonight, we're talking about a very serious subject. And this is really one of those things that we as parents should really be worried about. How much of a worry should it be for us that we have children that are not able to speak in their mother tongue, but are very comfortable to converse in English?
Well, yes, it is a reality that's what is happening. Think about the fact that many of us are working parents. We take our children to school. We only see them early in the morning, late in the afternoon, evening, depending on when you get to pick them up. So the input time for languages, for our home African languages, becomes relatively short. Also consider the fact that for many of us, we do not live necessarily in the communities where our languages are spoken. And secondly, for many of us still also, we have partnered and made home with other people who do not necessarily share a common language with. Language is about speaking, yes, but it's also an indicator or identifier of culture. And when one does not speak your language, you miss out on certain elements of culture. Just look at what you just done now of asking me talk about my own totem. It's not everybody who understands how to actually even to try to do that. So for me, language is something that I believe is something that we need to be able to teach and preserve.
And, others would say that we're making a fuss when we say children should not only be speaking in English. Are we really?
I don't believe that we're making a fuss. We are trying to be able to pass on certain traits of ourselves, yes, but also we live in a multilingual world, and we live in a multicultural world. We do not all look, speak, or sound the same. So we should not also then not just be speaking one language. Yes, English is a global language. Yes, it's a language of communication for many of us. We are speaking in English right now. But it is not a fuss to be able to look at certain aspects that identify us and help us to be able to say that these are the markers of who we are. Language is a marker.
And when we then look at, the importance of this conversation in the context of our children being able to speak to their grandparents, because there's sometimes a lot of difficulties for grandparents, especially or in the townships or wherever their grandparents may be, for them to be able to speak to their grandchildren because there's this language barrier now.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, just to get a little personal, I understand that struggle and I understand that journey. I myself have been through the process of losing fluency in my mother tongue and struggling to be able to regain it. So I know and understand from a child's perspective what that feels like, but I also am a parent and I know what it feels like as well from a parent's perspective when you're trying to be able to have a conversation with your child and they generally cannot understand what you're trying to be able to say. And that's what we're trying to be able to solve here at Rera Language School, just that bridging, speaking with grandparents, speaking with other people that you meet even just in the street.
I wonder, how do you then bridge this? Because one of the things that, I mean, even for, I would say, anchors like myself, sometimes you find that people cannot even speak English. And because you're on an English medium, it becomes difficult for you to then be able to get the real story out of them. And this is not only in relation to children. How do we then begin to bridge this gap? What tips would you say for us as parents, but at the same time, in our working spaces, to be able to make people feel included?
Yep. It's the inclusion, I think, is a big point that you just raised there. And it's a small thing of, even just a small thing of saying, how do I learn to be able to say hello, thank you, to somebody in their own mother tongue? There's a quote that's purported to be from Nelson Mandela, which says that to speak to talk to a man in your language, you speak to his head. To talk to his heart, you need to speak his language. And that's really saying that we need to be able to communicate clearly to each other. And it's important for us, as we communicate clearly to each other, that we are looking at different ways that we look at that. Tips for parents, it's looking at little things like, for instance, saying, we intentionally will be spending X amount of time to be able to communicate together. Dinner time is, I always advise, is a good time, because we're all sitting together and having dinner together. Or games that you may be able to look at and play together. You have games that you must remember from your own childhood, but also I'm sure, as for those of us who are parents, we have games that our children enjoy. How do we turn those and look at those in our mother tongues? How do we even convert even if you don't even have to go out and buy things, but how do you convert what you have existing in the house to be able to turn it into a game in a language that you're trying to be able to communicate with your children? Remembering that if we make something interesting for children, they will participate. If we make it as something of a punitive aspect, then they become disinterested in it. So fun is an important element in here.
As you talk about fun, I'm actually picturing us as parents playing dibeke, bati, mukusha, including our children, and making sure that we really are bridging this particular gap. But let's also then look at, as you say that it should be fun, it should be, important for us as parents to then not make it punitive. How important will it be then for us to even play with them, and not simply just teach them and leave them, and not simply just sit on our laptops and think that they'll be able to learn from whomever? But how important is this sharing of, our history, because it is part of our history with them?
Yes. It's sharing your stories, sharing your childhood, sharing jokes. I love to be able to share a story around how it's a lack of understanding of jokes that actually spurred me into learning to be more fluent, because sitting there not understanding what people are saying, but you're trying to be able to figure it out is a little embarrassing, because the joke becomes on you then. And also looking at its jokes, making it fun, making it necessary as well, because remember that there's just to get a little technical for half a second, in the linguistic communities, you'll hear people talking about many of our children are considered to be receptive bilinguals. By that is that they'll understand, but they don't necessarily speak. A lot of the time is because we're hearing them speak or rather, they're hearing us speak in Sesotho, isiZulu, isiXhosa, and the other languages that you may be speaking to them in. But they're responding back in English. The fact that they're seeing that there is no need for them to be able to respond back in the language you're speaking to them in is also an indicator of the fact that they know that you can understand what it is that they're saying. So there's no need then to be able to speak. So that aspect of looking at diketo or ngusha, those are fun, because it's like, also, even if you think of the little rhymes and rhythms that you're saying as you play some of the games, they help you to be able to send out particular kind of messages. Songs is another a tip to be able to look at, whether it's children's songs or your favorite songs that you're singing in your children can relate to. Those make a difference as well.
Now, how does one then begin to reach out to you and be able to get some kind of this assistance? Because I'm sure parents are watching tonight and wondering how they can be able to make use of some services that you have. Do you have any workshops coming up?
Well, yes. In fact, quite interestingly, I've partnered with Ebukhosini Solutions, and we have a workshop that's taking place tomorrow. And if people can get in touch with myself and the people at Ebukhosini Solutions as well, my information is, you can find me on our website, info@rera.africa. That's the email address. The website is www.rera.africa. So that's how you can be able to get in touch with us. We do, our mission is to be able to teach and preserve the different languages in South Africa. But I think it's important that we do provide an important bridge, but also the input from the parent before and after class is very important.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We certainly do appreciate it, and all the best with that workshop tomorrow. That was the Chief Language Coach at Rera Language, Matsobane Sexwale.